Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for our February Q&A episodes, and due to a recent lockdown here in the state of Victoria, we have the reintroduction of Monitor Steve, the long-awaited reintroduction. I know a lot of people love the inclusion of Monitor Steve, so he's back. How are you doing?
Good, it's good to be back.
Yeah, so I've put you in an Alienware monitor. So the Alienware monitor we just reviewed on the channel a couple of days ago, the AW2721D. It's a nice high-end monitor for you, IPS technology, so you're looking as spectacular as you can be. And yeah, this should suit us well for the next couple of Q&As. Hopefully next month, everything will be back to normal for us. We'll be able to meet up in person again. But yeah, for now, there has been a bit of a lockdown. So just bad timing for us, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is a bit. But anyway, this works. This works quite well. Got the webcam back out and we're ready to answer some questions.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, what are some graphic settings that are almost always not worth the performance hit that is taken in relation to how much the settings improve the visuals of a game? I feel like this one's a bit of it's a trap because I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
You're not going to say it? I'm not going to say it either. Let's not say it.
Let's not say
the number one reason. Let's go to potentially some other ones that's not worth the performance hit. It really depends. I feel like it's shifted over the years because previously, if we were talking 5 years ago, probably say like your MSAA and your tessellation settings would have been like the big ones, especially in the very early days of both those things. I think these days now it's more stuff like your volumetrics, like your volumetric clouds, well, not so much volumetric lighting these days, but certainly clouds. Developers seem to go way over the top with cloud quality for some reason. It tends to look nice in some games, but yeah, way over the top. What else would you say? I think the one that's sort of been consistent throughout the years has been draw quality as well, like how far into the distance you can see, although that does... Yeah, I guess it depends how noticeable things are in the distance, but...
depends on the game as well, obviously.
Yeah, it can be a big performance. Like if you were talking Flight Simulator, for example, turning that up to like the highest levels of draw distance really takes performance.
But would you say it's not worth a performance hit because it really improves the realism of the game, especially in a simulator like that where you're going for a high degree of realism?
I guess it depends like how far, like there's a point where obviously you can't see beyond a certain point, so it doesn't make much sense to push up the quality a lot there. So it does depend game by game as to whether that setting makes a lot of difference. It's probably one that's worth it in some situations. And what else? Just, your usual like shadow quality. Usually you can turn that down 1 or 2 notches and not lose a ton of
I was going to say shadows, yeah.
So
obviously you still want shadows, but
yes.
like the ultra shadows are usually indistinguishable from high and sometimes even medium, whereas they tank performance quite heavily.
Yeah, so it's a lot of those things these days where it's not... There might be 1 or 2 things like we talked about, volumetric clouds or fog as one example, where you can turn that down quite a long way and you tend to be able to recover a lot of performance. But there's a lot of settings these days where it's just the ultra setting doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it's a very small improvement over high or even medium. We saw that a lot with games like Cyberpunk, where really you could turn that game down to medium and it looks amazing, with ultra only being just that little bit better. So yeah, I guess... Yeah, a lot of different quality settings. I think the ones that wouldn't apply these days would be like your textures. Still textures look very good on high quality settings. You know, again, like your close visual, like the amount of stuff that's shown in the screen, like your clutter settings or I don't really know what else you would call those settings, but all those little itty bitty things that they like to put in games these days to improve the environment. That's another one that I tend to think is very worth turning up. Yeah.
Detail level type stuff.
Yeah, detail level type stuff. All that stuff's worth cranking up, and then the rest of it you can usually turn it down 1 or 2 notches.
It's probably a doomsday scenario, but what are the possibilities that as long as Ethereum mining and Bitcoin get accepted by more mainstream companies, consumers will never have enough GPUs for the market? The only reason GPUs were in stock last generation was because the Bitcoin bubble popped and people gave up on mining for a while. So what do you reckon, Tim?
Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency mining, it always ebbs and flows. Like this isn't the first time that we've seen, a boom in cryptocurrency mining. It's not the first time that this is going to happen. It'll happen in the future. It's happened in the past. So it's just something that's a reality of the GPU market at the moment and probably for as long as we can think of. So yeah, at the moment there's going to be a boom because the Ethereum price skyrocketed overnight. At least in a couple of days, it really went up significantly. And anytime that's going to happen in the future, then this is probably going to be the case. But as time goes on, and as the currencies tend to stabilize for a period of time or go backwards at other times, that's when the profitability of mining on modern GPUs tends to die away a little bit. So yeah, this is just, I know you're saying here that this could be a doomsday scenario, and there's a lot of doom and gloom about mining in the community right now, which I think some of it is warranted. Now it's definitely not a great time to be buying a graphics card for gaming, but yeah, we've seen this in the past. It's going to take, maybe 6 months, maybe a year until it fully dies away and it's replaced by other things that are more efficient for mining, or just it doesn't make as much financial sense to invest money in GPUs and all that. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts on this one. I think that there will be a time when you will be able to buy one as just an everyday consumer. You could go back to probably the most recent example, the one that sticks in my mind the most would have been like the Vega 56 and 64 situation. When those GPUs came out, we were in a little bit of a mining boom. Vega 56 was exceptional for mining, at least relative to NVIDIA's GPUs. So I think it was about like 4 or 5 months, it was virtually impossible to buy a Vega GPU. And then, like we were talking about, over time, the currency stabilizes or it flatlines or it goes backwards. Other things become more capable of mining, like ASICs. That's not always the case. Some cryptocurrencies don't run well on ASICs, others do. But these are all things that help to reduce the profitability of mining over time. And that's when you start to see that swing back towards it being available for gamers. So I'd expect that would happen over time. And theoretically, all those GPUs that have been bought up by mining farms to use for mining will start hitting the used market, and that could be a really great time to jump in as sort of the price for those GPUs dives a lot. Again, we've seen that in the past with these GPUs. So yeah, we don't have to look far back in history to figure out exactly what happens when these things happen. You just have to ride out the waves, as unfortunate as it is right now.
All right, one here for Tim. As you mentioned before, higher overshoot applies more voltage to each pixel transition. So does that mean higher voltage or higher overdrive setting will affect the lifespan of the monitor? Overclocking your monitor, Tim.
Yeah, I guess it's not really overclocking in the sense that it is actually like a setting in the monitor. So it's something that the manufacturer supports and is like, hey, that's fine to do. So I guess from a theoretical standpoint, yes, if you slam more voltage into the the LCD layer, then over time that should theoretically degrade it more quickly. That's a fairly common thing. You try and drive something faster, get something to switch more quickly, it tends to degrade it more. The question is that going to affect the lifespan of the monitor in a meaningful way? Because if it's a difference between, say, the monitor lasting 18 years and 23 years, it's probably not something that an everyday monitor buyer has to worry about. But if we're talking more like it's going to die after 2 years versus 3 years, then that's obviously much more significant. That's within the normal lifespan I would say people keep their monitor for. And I think all the evidence so far suggested that it's not really significant enough of a factor to worry about if you use your monitor for, say, 5 to 8 years, which I think if you're buying like a high-end monitor like this Alienware one, you might expect it to last that long. Again, it is a supported feature of the monitors. So they are saying, hey, we expect this monitor to last for a reasonable amount of time with these settings that we're providing the monitor. If you go outside of that, like refresh rate overclocking and all that sort of thing, then yeah, it might die a bit earlier because it's running out of spec, but this is still an in-spec behavior. So I would expect that it will reduce the lifespan of your monitor, but probably not in a way that actually makes any difference for you buying monitors. So don't worry about it. Use the overdrive settings that make the most sense. Get the most out of your monitor and yeah, just enjoy what it's capable of.
All right, next one here. When do you think 60 FPS performance in RTX games like Cyberpunk Control will come to the $300 GPU market? I do consider DLSS for this, and I am still playing on a 1080p display. So 1080p, 60 FPS, ray tracing enabled, $300 GPU. Well, I guess it's always the question. For a game like Cyberpunk Control, probably sort of the next generation of GPUs would do it. But if you're talking about the Controls and Cyberpunk games of the next generation, then it's hard to say. Yeah. It may never be a $300 GPU feature, at least no time soon. It might be something you have to really pay a premium for. I don't know, what do you reckon, Tim?
I guess there's two ways to look at it, really. There's kind of, there's the full ray tracing experience, and then there's sort of the compromised ray tracing experience. This is what I talked about a bit in the Cyberpunk video, for example. So an RTX 2060, RTX 2070 right now, I would say are more your compromised 60 FPS ray tracing experience in Cyberpunk, whereas if you bought like an RTX 3080 or 3090, then you're sort of getting the full experience. So if we're talking a compromised experience, then I mean, you can always lower the resolution, lower other quality settings, and play with ray tracing and DLSS enabled on modern GPUs. You're just not getting like, you might have to turn down your texture settings because 6 gigabytes of VRAM is usually not enough to run ray tracing, and so on. So you start running into all these issues. So if we're talking $300 GPU market, then possibly an RTX 3060 that's upcoming, it would be able to do it if it's like 2070 super-like performance. But again, compromised experience. You're talking about DLSS and playing at 1080p, whereas that GPU is going to be able to do like your 1440p 60 FPS experience pretty easily otherwise. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where we sit. For now, it's going to be that situation where you can run ray tracing if you turn stuff down on these GPUs, and then hopefully within 5 years and all that, it's going to become more of a native, well, not necessarily native resolution, but ultra settings type thing that you would normally see from these GPUs. Because normally a $300 GPU can play 60 FPS ultra settings. That's right in the ballpark of what those GPUs can do. So yeah.
Okay, assuming that cryptocurrency mining continues into 2022, do you believe consumers will ever get easy access to RTX 3000 or Radeon 6000 cards this year? If so, which models? Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier. If we had to guess which models, it would probably be the lower end models, which has typically been the case, but it's hard to say. And it's really hard to say how the rest of this year will play out. Obviously, things aren't looking particularly great now, but they could change a bit over the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, crypto mining is kind of only one out of many factors that are currently affecting this whole market. Obviously, it's a big factor, but you've also got, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so there's a lot of supply and shipping related issues with getting these GPUs in people's hands. Some companies are fab limited. We've talked about this before with AMD having a lot of products on TSMC 7nm. So once like console demand dies off, then you'd expect more allocation to be available for GPUs there. There's all sorts of different factors that are contributing to this. So theoretically, if cryptocurrency mining continues but the other areas improve, then there is a chance that these GPUs could become available. And if I was going to guess which models, I do agree with low-end GPUs are probably going to be more available, but also models that do not feature any cut-down silicon. So something that we have noticed is that the GPUs that are more available right now are the ones that are the fully unlocked dies, like your RTX 3090, RTX 3070, which each use like the maximum that we currently have configurations of those dies. And the 3060 Ti and the 3080 are virtually unsighted because NVIDIA's decided, quite rightly, that they may as well just sell all those dies as the higher priced, better binned version, because if everyone's buying everything, put all the products in the ones that's selling at the higher price. So for the short term, I would expect, perhaps a 3060 could alleviate some of that because it is a new die. It is, it's not cut down in any way, so they're not waiting for bins and defective dies to produce those products. An issue that we have seen previously with something like the Ryzen 3 products, the 3100 and 3300X. When they were selling out all the other Ryzen products, it didn't make sense to, use products that otherwise could have been more expensive CPUs. So we'll see a bit of that on the GPU side as well, I would imagine. And similar on the Radeon side, 6900 XT I would expect to be more available than the other two products that use that similar sort of silicon. So yeah, these are all the sort of complications in the market right now, and you're just going to have to be on top of it to figure out which ones are going to be available. But hopefully over time, as more dies get produced, more GPUs, the entire stack's filled out, that it will become a better situation for people, even though mining is probably going to continue for a little bit.
Yeah, I think our answer mostly addresses the RTX 3000 series. For the Radeon 6000 cards, as we spoke of many times in the past, I think probably the mining pressures are less of an issue there. It's probably more the fact that just the 7nm processor is so tapped out. They're creating so many different products on it, Zen 2, Zen 3. So, I think probably with the Radeon 6000 series cards, I don't think the answer where we were sort of talking about lower end GPUs will necessarily see Radeon supply improve because it's still the 7nm supply that's the issue there. So we're less likely to see more Radeon cards this year, whereas I think the lower end Ampere GPUs might be a goer for gamers.
Yeah, on the AMD side, it's all about that 7nm allocation. There's no point allocating cheap, low-margin products from an AMD perspective. It would be great for us as consumers, so please, AMD, go and do this. But from a business perspective, AMD, outside of fulfilling their contractual agreements with Sony and Microsoft for the consoles, it's going to be your epic CPUs. It's going to be your professional workstation GPUs, your data center GPUs, where the margins are much higher, so that will allow AMD to make the most money. And then low-end consumer CPUs and GPUs are kind of like the lowest priority. So while we're still supply constrained, there's no incentive at all to make those products. So yeah, it's all going to be these sort of higher end products and things that, yeah, it's kind of a bad situation for AMD to be in, as we've talked about many times, but it is what it is, and hopefully over time it'll improve. All right, got a couple of questions about APUs here, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Steve. Do you see AMD APUs as a viable option for a new build while there are no DGPUs available?
Yes and no. I haven't actually looked into stock, but I've heard that the AMD APUs availability is pretty bad right now. So if that's the case, then obviously no. But also, AMD APUs, they're really only equivalent to the absolute slowest discrete GPUs that you can purchase. So usually you can get those pretty cheap anyway, like a GeForce GT 1030 or an RX 550. So I haven't looked into the availability of those parts, but generally they're a little bit faster. So APUs are very much bottom of the barrel. They are good in the sense that you can get a decent CPU with something that can game in Rocket League and maybe Fortnite at very low quality settings. But how much of they're certainly not a viable option for anyone who wants like an Ampere GPU or an RDNA 2 GPU.
Yeah, and I think that this next question at least comes up a fair bit. With the new AMD APUs in the works, what do you guys think about the future of APUs? Is it possibly the future of budget gaming at least? And yeah, I feel like this comes up so many times. People think that like APUs are going to be the next big thing for budget gaming, but as an APU gets faster, so does the lower end discrete GPUs. So it's kind of that race of APUs are always competing with, as you say, like your GT 1030 class products. And so far we haven't seen them accelerate beyond that sort of capability yet. So yes, I guess they could sell like a PS5 capable APU if they really wanted to, require an entirely different motherboard and socket and all that sort of thing, because it's a completely different die shape. But yeah, it just doesn't seem like that future is ever really going to be a thing. I know people love to talk about it, but what do you think?
Well, I'm not going to rule it out entirely, but I can't see it happening anytime soon because of limitations that we've spoke about before with APUs, such as memory bandwidth being one.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't think next generation or anything like that, the entry-level APUs will be replacing entry-level discrete GPUs, because as you say, they'll be using a similar technology, but the discrete GPUs have numerous advantages that make them faster. So
yep.
Yeah, not going to happen anytime soon. But as I said, the advantage of an APU is the fact that if you're building a new computer and you're looking at getting an entry-level type CPU and an entry-level type GPU, often buying them in the one package can be cheaper. Not necessarily better, but it can be cheaper. So you can build a very small, very compact budget gaming system.
Considering the availability of parts or lack thereof, is it a good time to just buy a laptop? And I think we were talking about this just recently on the live stream, but yeah, my basic opinion on this is that a laptop it's not really equivalent to a desktop. It is a different class of products. And yes, I guess if you're buying something for gaming, you could just set your laptop up over there and plug in an external monitor, an external keyboard and mouse, and you've got something that's similar-ish to a desktop. But my issue is that laptop pricing for the hardware that you're getting is always well above a desktop. So we're currently in a situation where desktop availability is not great and prices are inflated. And the alternative suggestion in this question is buy a laptop which is more available but suffers from effectively the same price inflation stuff. Like you'll see in an upcoming video on the channel shortly about the RTX 3070 laptop GPU, which to be frank, is not really close to an RTX 3070 on the desktop. And you're probably having to spend $1,400, $1,500 US minimum on a laptop that has that GPU inside. And you're only really getting 2070 superish performance. I haven't finished all of the testing yet, but it seems to me from early assessment, from what other people have benchmarked, that best case you're looking at like 2070 super, which obviously is not an RTX 3070. So when you're faced with that situation where, yeah, you're getting decent performance out of a laptop but not really desktop equivalent, and then the pricing is probably not super favorable on the laptop side, it really is a toss-up between, you know, what's available to you and what sort of makes sense for your use case. I certainly wouldn't be advocating that laptops make a ton of sense, and that's not even factoring in all the other considerations when it comes to laptops, like lack of upgradability in many instances, especially on key components like the CPU and GPU. So even if it is maybe better value, that's something to consider where you're not getting the upgrade path necessarily. You've also got supply issues with laptop related parts. AMD's Ryzen 5000 series for laptops still is under a significant supply constraint for the exact same reasons as we've been talking about for everything else in AMD's lineup. So yeah, it's probably not the worst time to be considering a laptop as a desktop alternative, but it's not something I just go out and definitely do right now. There's still a lot of considerations to make.
Yeah, I mean, my views on this one are always fairly simple and always very consistent. Whenever someone asks me, should I buy a laptop, and this is regardless of whether you're gaming or not, just laptop versus desktop, my advice is only buy a laptop if you need to take it somewhere. If it's going to sit at your desk or you're using it for one place, there is absolutely no point buying a laptop. It doesn't make as much financial sense. It's generally not as powerful or flexible. As Tim said, it can't be upgraded. There's just a long list of drawbacks to the laptop option. So laptops only make sense if you pick the thing up and you take it somewhere quite regularly. Otherwise, just get a desktop.
All right, next question. Do you think the current mining craze combined with the supply issues may permanently damage the PC gaming market? It seems like there is no end in sight, and now that we have new and very powerful consoles available, I'm worried many people may just move over to the PS5 or Xbox. I guess this discussion of people moving from PC gaming to console gaming always comes up around the time that new consoles are available, and I don't even think it's really related to the supply issues. People, even if there weren't supply issues, people would be talking about the value of like a $500 console compared to spending, say, $1,000 on a PC that runs games in a sort of similar way. So yeah, it's always talked about when this sort of thing happens. I don't think it's really a thing. Like, people who want to play console games play console games. People that want to play on PC play PC. There is always going to be a group of people that say got into PC gaming midway through a console cycle where PCs were obviously a fair bit more powerful, and then they may migrate back over to consoles once the new consoles are available. But generally speaking, that doesn't really seem to damage the PC market anyway. PC gaming is still increasing in popularity, so I'd say that's pretty much a non-issue. As for it permanently damaging because of supply issues, I don't think so. It'll recover in the same way that it always does. Again, this is not the first time we've seen supply issues or cryptocurrency issues. It's just something that happens from time to time, and yeah, people may get some short-term relief by buying a PlayStation 5. Not that you can actually just go and buy those super easily anyway. But yeah, that may be a short-term thing, but long-term, yeah, people that want to play on PC will come back and play on PC.
It looks like a Tim-related question here. Any words on RDNA 2 for laptops? And knowing that RDNA 2 is relatively more efficient than Ampere, do you think it will outperform basically the Ampere laptop options? Great work, guys. Keep it up. Well, thank you. What do you reckon, Tim?
So I think AMD said that RDNA 2 laptops are coming in the next couple of months. I'm not 100% sure exactly on the time frame or whether it was actually, maybe next quarter or the quarter after. I'll have to go back and have a look at the exact timing on that, but AMD has at least teased that sort of product, so we know it's in the works. Again, that's sort of availability dependent. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to launch even more products in 7nm right now, so you'd assume that some of the console supply would have to have alleviated for this to even make sense. As for how it will perform, I mean, right now it does look like the efficiency is pretty good on the desktop side. However, it's running at a completely different power level. We don't know whether it scales better than Ampere does at, say, your 115 watts or 80 watts that are typical for laptops. we don't really know what that's sort of going to look like yet. And previous designs, even though they were on 7 nanometer, were not very competitive with Turing that was running on 12 nanometer. So again, it has improved a lot this generation, but there's still a lot of stuff to play out there in terms of performance and efficiency. So yeah, we'll have to do some benchmarking when they're available.
Okay, we'll hit pause there on part 1 of the February Q&A. A lot of good questions already, quite a few more to get through by the looks of it. And hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And I know I did, being Monitor Steve again. It's been a blast, whole lot of fun. And what about you, Tim? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, it's always enjoyable. I think in the sort of slowdown period that we're having in terms of hardware, I think these are some of the best content that we're making at the moment. It's the most enjoyable to get on, just answer you guys' questions, the things that you guys are interested in, as opposed to doing like graphics card reviews on things that you can't actually buy and all that. I think it's it's a good time. Good time for the Q&A.
Yeah, I think it is as well, and I enjoy making them as well. I believe you do. So
yeah,
good to get together, have a chat, answer some viewer questions and stuff like that. So yeah, the Q&A series is always a lot of fun.
Nice.
So on that note, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for asking questions. And of course, if you liked the video, give Monitor Steve a like. You can also join us over at Floatplane or Patreon. So really cool Hardware Unboxed community over there. We have a Discord chat where Tim, you're over there chatting a lot about monitor stuff in the monitor section. There's plenty of other sections there though, so you can talk about things other than monitors. What else have we got, Tim? Well, we do a live stream. We just did that like a few hours ago, but we do at least one of those every month. Behind the scenes videos, Q&As. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff anyway. If you guys are interested, you know where to find the links. They're somewhere in that video description, probably towards the top. I don't know, Tim. That's pretty much going to do it for part 1.
I'd say so, yeah.
So yeah, Tim, your host. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim. See you in the next one.